The creature in the containment cell had killed 47 beings in the past 6 months. It stood 12 feet tall when it raised itself on its back legs. Its scales were black as deep space, and its 6 eyes glowed with a cold, hungry light. The claws on its forearms could cut through reinforced steel like paper. Every species in the Galactic Coalition had a name for it, and every name meant the same thing: death. They called it the Shadow Reaper. They called it the Doom Beast. But its official classification was simple: native to the toxic jungles of IV, where nothing soft survived for long. Orbital Station Nexus 7 floated in the darkness between 3 star systems. It was a place where different species came together to trade, to negotiate, and sometimes to study things that should have been left alone. The station was home to over 10,000 beings from dozens of worlds. Most of them had heard about the creature in the lower containment levels. Most of them stayed far away. Commander stood before the observation window and watched the pace inside its cell. He was tall and broad, with 4 muscular arms and skin that glowed faintly blue when he was stressed. Right now, his skin was very blue indeed. 17 species have tried to work with this creature, he said to the council members gathered behind him. They sent their best animal handlers, dead within minutes. They tried telepathic bonding. 3 of them went insane before they could break the connection. Even they who can communicate with almost any living thing failed completely. He turned to face the council. The creature is scheduled for termination at the end of this cycle. It is simply too dangerous to keep alive. A soft voice spoke from the back of the room. I would like to try. Everyone turned to look at the human. Jake was not impressive by galactic standards. He was shorter than most species in the room, with no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. His skin was a simple brown color that did not glow or change. His eyes were small and dark. He wore the plain gray uniform of the Coalition's research division, and he held a data pad in his hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. His 4 arms crossed over his chest. You are joking. No, sir, I am not. Human, you must understand something. Your species has been part of this coalition for only 30 years. You are considered fragile, primitive. No offense intended, but your people still eat dead animals and breathe a single type of atmosphere that would kill you before you finished saying hello. Jake nodded slowly. I understand why you might think that, but I have spent 15 years working with dangerous predators on my home world. Grizzly bears, great white sharks, crocodiles, animals that have killed many humans over the centuries. I have studied their behavior, learned their body language, and earned their trust. A council member laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. Earth predators are nothing compared to your planet is a garden world, a paradise. They evolved on a death world where the very air can melt your lungs. That may be true, Jake said calmly, but predators are predators no matter where they come from. They all have the same basic needs: food, safety, territory, and something else that most people forget. What is that? Asked. Respect. The room was quiet for a long moment. Jake stepped forward and looked through the observation window. The had stopped packing. All 6 of its eyes were fixed on him, watching him with an intensity that made several council members step backward. But Jake did not move. He simply looked back at the creature and studied it carefully. I have read all the reports, he said. Every attack, every incident, every failed attempt to control this animal. Do you know what I noticed? Every single handler approached with the same attitude. They saw it as a problem to be solved, a beast to be dominated. They used force fields, shock collars, sedation, telepathic pressure. They tried to break its will. He turned back to the council, but no one tried to understand it. No one asked why it was so aggressive. No one considered that maybe, just maybe, the creature was not attacking because it wanted to kill. It was attacking because it was terrified. Its blue glow flickered. Terrified. That thing has torn apart some of the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. Fear and violence often go together, Jake said. On Earth, we learned this lesson thousands of years ago. The most dangerous animal is not the one that wants to hunt you. It is the one that feels trapped, alone, and afraid. That animal will fight until its last breath because it believes it has no other choice. He looked back at the creature had moved closer to the transparent barrier. Its claws scraped against the floor, leaving deep grooves in the metal. This was captured on IV 8 months ago. According to the records, it was a juvenile at the time. It was separated from its family group and transported across the galaxy in a cage barely large enough for it to turn around. It has been shocked, sedated, and experimented on. Every being who has entered its space has tried to hurt it or control it. Jake's voice was soft but steady. If someone did that to me, I would fight too. I would kill anyone who came near me. Not because I was evil, but because I had learned that every new face meant more pain. Commander was silent for a long time. The other council members whispered among themselves in various languages, but just watched the human with a thoughtful expression. "You truly believe you can work with this creature?" he finally asked. "I believe I can try," Jake said. "And if I fail, you lose nothing. The creature was going to be killed anyway, but if I succeed, you gain something valuable. Proof that there is another way, that understanding can succeed where force has failed." Looked at then back at Jake. "Your people are strange, human. You are small and weak and breakable, yet you volunteer to enter a cage with a monster that has killed dozens of beings far stronger than you. Why?" Jake smiled. It was a small, tired smile. "Because someone has to. Because that creature is alone and afraid, and I know what that feels like. And because I believe that every living thing deserves a chance to be understood before it is destroyed." The commander's skin flickered from blue to a softer purple. It was a color that meant he was thinking deeply. "Very well, human. I will give you access to the containment bay. But you will follow all safety protocols and you will not lower the barrier under any circumstances. If the creature shows any sign of aggression toward you, you will leave immediately. Is that understood?" Jake nodded. "Understood, Commander." "Then may whatever gods your people believe in watch over you, because I fear you will need all the help you can get." Jake turned and walked toward the door. As he left, he glanced one last time at the observation window. That was still watching him, its 6 eyes burning with something that might have been curiosity or hunger or both. He would find out soon enough. The containment bay was cold and smelled like metal and fear. Jake walked through the heavy security doors alone, carrying nothing but a worn paperback book and a small bag. The guards at the entrance had looked at him like he was already dead. One of them, a large with gray skin and tusks, had actually said a prayer for him in a language Jake did not understand. He appreciated the thought. They saw him immediately. The creature rose from the far corner of its cell and moved toward the energy barrier that separated them. Its movements were smooth and deadly, like water flowing over rocks. Each step made the floor vibrate slightly. Its claws clicked against the metal surface with a sound like knives being sharpened. Jake stopped about 10 feet from the barrier. He could feel the heat coming off the energy field. He could see every detail of the creature now. The way its scales overlapped like armor, the scars on its hide from old fights, the intelligence burning in those 6 terrible eyes. He opened its mouth and screamed. It was a sound that seemed to shake the walls. A sound designed by millions of years of evolution to freeze prey in place, to turn muscles to water and thoughts to panic. The other species who had tried to work with this creature had run at this point, or frozen in terror, or tried to fight back. Jake sat down on the floor. He crossed his legs, opened his book, and began to read out loud. The stopped screaming. It tilted its massive head to one side, confused. This was not the reaction it expected. Every other being had shown fear or aggression or both. This small, soft creature was just sitting there, making strange mouth sounds and looking at a flat object in its hands. Jake read for 2 hours. His voice was calm and steady, neither too loud nor too soft. The book was an old favorite, a story about a man and a tiger on a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. He had read it many times before. He knew every word by heart, but he read it anyway because the act of reading gave him something to focus on. The paced back and forth behind the barrier. Sometimes it would slam its claws against the energy field and roar. Sometimes it would crouch low and watch him with those burning eyes. But Jake never looked directly at it. He never raised his voice. He never showed any sign that he was afraid, even though his heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. When his voice grew tired, he closed the book and stood up slowly. "Same time tomorrow," he said softly. Then he turned and walked away. The watched him go. It did not roar. It did not attack the barrier. It just watched, and something in those 6 eyes changed slightly. Something that might have been the first tiny seed of curiosity. Jake came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Dr. Lyra was the station's chief. She was a species known for their analytical minds and their ability to read emotional patterns in other beings. She had been watching Jake's sessions through the security cameras, and what she saw fascinated her. On the 3rd day, she joined him in the observation room above the containment bay. "The creature's stress hormones have decreased by 12% since you started," she said, studying her data pad. "Its sleep patterns have improved. It is eating more regularly. I do not understand how this is possible." Jake was watching through the window. The creature was lying down now, its eyes half closed, listening to him read through the speakers he had installed. "Predators are not so different from each other," he said. "They all need to feel safe before they can relax. The has learned that when I am here, nothing bad happens. No shocks, no sedation, no pain, just a voice telling a story. It is starting to associate my presence with peace." "But you have not done anything," Lyra said. "You just sit there and read." "That is the point. Every other handler tried to do something to they tried to control it, to train it, to force it to obey. But you cannot force trust. You can only earn it, and earning trust takes time and patience." Lyra's large purple eyes blinked slowly. "Humans are a young species. Your civilization is barely 10,000 years old. How did you learn these things?" Jake smiled. "We learned them the hard way. For most of our history, we were not the top predators on our planet. We were small and slow and weak compared to the things that hunted us. We survived by being smart, by working together, and by learning to understand the animals around us. Some of those animals became our partners. Dogs, horses, falcons. We did not conquer them. We earned their friendship." "Friendship with predators," Lyra said slowly. "That concept does not exist in most galactic cultures. Animals are tools or threats, nothing more." "Maybe that is why those cultures failed with the—" On the 4th day, Jake did something that made the entire station hold its breath. He lowered the energy barrier. Security Chief burst into the containment area with a squad of armed guards. He was a light commander, but older and harder, his 4 arms covered with scars from decades of combat. "Human, have you lost your mind?" he roared. "Raise that barrier immediately." Jake was standing inside the cell. There was 10 feet away from him, its claws extended, its body tense. Every guard had their weapon pointed at the creature, ready to fire. "If you shoot, you will make things worse," Jake said quietly. "She is deciding right now whether I am a threat. If she sees violence, she will respond with violence. Lower your weapons." "I will not." "Lower your weapons." Jake's voice was still calm, but there was iron in it now. "Please." The took a step toward him, then another. Its claws scraped against the floor. Its breath was hot and smelled like copper. Jake could see his own reflection in those 6 burning eyes. He did not move. He did not speak. He just stood there and let the creature approach. The stopped directly in front of him. Its head was level with his chest. One swipe of those claws could cut him in half. One snap of those jaws could take his head clean off. Slowly, carefully, Jake raised his hand. He held it out, palm up, fingers relaxed, not reaching for the creature, just offering. The sniffed his hand. Its nostrils flared. It made a low, rumbling sound deep in its chest. Then it lowered its massive head and pressed it gently against Jake's palm. The guard stared in disbelief. His 4 arms hung limp at his sides. Even Lyra, watching from the observation room above, could not find words for what she was seeing. Jake stood there with his hand on the head of the most dangerous creature in the galaxy, and he smiled. "Hello, Shadow," he said softly. "It is nice to finally meet you." The rumbled again. It was almost like a purr. And for the first time in 8 months, there was no fear in its eyes. Word spread through Nexus 7 like fire through dry grass. The human had touched the human had named the human walked into the containment cell every day and spent hours with the creature, and he was still alive. Some people called it a miracle. Others called it madness. A few said it was some kind of human trick, that their primitive species had secret powers no one knew about. Commander simply called it interesting and ordered the security teams to stand down unless Jake specifically requested help. Jake did not request help. He did not need it. In the 2 weeks since first contact, Shadow had transformed. She still looked terrifying, with her black scales and burning eyes and claws that could tear through metal. But she no longer paced her cell like a caged animal waiting to die. She no longer screamed at every being who passed by the observation window. She slept more peacefully now. She ate the food that Jake brought her without suspicion. And when Jake entered the cell each morning, she would rise and walk toward him, her massive head lowering so he could touch the smooth scales between her eyes. It was during the 3rd week that Jake made his greatest discovery. He had noticed that Shadow sometimes made sounds that were too low for most species to hear, deep vibrations that seemed to come from her chest, almost like the rumble of distant thunder. Jake had borrowed some equipment from the station's science division and recorded these sounds. When he analyzed them, he found patterns. Complex, repeating patterns. Shadow was not just making noise, she was speaking. Jake spent 3 days learning to mimic those vibrations. Human vocal cords were not designed for such low frequencies, but he found that if he hummed deep in his chest while pressing his throat with his fingers, he could produce something close enough. The first time he tried it, Shadow's 6 eyes went wide with shock. She made a sound back, a quick burst of low vibrations that Jake recorded and studied. By the end of the week, they were having simple conversations. "This is impossible," said Dr. Lyra as she watched the recordings. They were believed to be non-sentient. Intelligent, yes, but operating purely on instinct. We had no idea they had a language. "You never listened," Jake said simply. "The frequency is below the hearing range of most coalition species. Humans can barely detect it, but we can feel it if we pay attention. That rumbling sensation I always felt around Shadow, that was her trying to communicate. She was calling out for 8 months and no one heard her." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Her purple skin had gone pale. "What has she been saying?" Jake looked away. "She has been asking where her family is. She has been asking why she is alone. She has been asking if anyone is out there, over and over, and getting only silence in return." The weight of that truth hung in the air between them. Jake learned more in the following days. Shadow was not a full adult. On IV, stayed with their family groups until they reached maturity, which took about 20 Earth years. Shadow was only 12. She was, in human terms, a child. A child who had been ripped from her home, stuffed in a cage, transported across the galaxy, and tortured by beings she could not understand. A child who had fought back with the only tools she had, her claws and her rage and her desperate will to survive. The 47 beings she had killed were not victims of a monster. They were casualties of a war that Shadow had never asked to fight. Jake reported his findings to the council. He stood before the assembled representatives of a dozen species and explained what he had learned. He played recordings of Shadow's vocalizations and showed them the translations he had worked out. He spoke about her age, her intelligence, her capacity for emotion and connection. "This creature is not a beast," he said. "She is a young person, lost and scared and far from home. What we have done to her is not research. It is not containment. It is imprisonment and abuse, and it must end." The council members shifted uncomfortably. Several of them would not meet Jake's eyes. Commander spoke first. "What do you propose, human?" "I propose that Shadow be given proper living quarters. Not a cell, but a space where she can move freely. I propose that we attempt to contact her species on IV and see if there is any possibility of returning her home. And I propose that the Coalition officially recognize these as sentient beings with rights and protections under galactic law." The representative made that wet, gurgling laugh again. "You cannot be serious. They are dangerous. They have killed hundreds of beings across dozens of worlds. Granting them legal protection would be madness." "They killed because we gave them no choice," Jake said. "We invaded their planet. We captured their children. We treated them like animals. If someone did that to your species, how would you respond?" They had no answer for that. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the council agreed to Jake's first request. Shadow would be moved to larger quarters in a different section of the station. The question of her legal status and possible return home would be discussed further. It was not everything Jake wanted, but it was a start. That night, Jake returned to Shadow's cell to tell her the news. He knelt beside her and placed his hand on her head, feeling the warmth of her scales beneath his palm. He hummed low in his chest, forming the words as best he could in her language. "You are getting a new home," he said. "A bigger place, with space to move, and I am working on getting you back to your family. It might take time, but I promise I will not stop trying." Shadow's 6 eyes blinked slowly. She made a soft vibration in response, and Jake felt it in his bones. He had learned enough of her language by now to understand the meaning. "Thank you," she was saying. "Thank you for hearing me." Jake leaned forward and rested his forehead against hers. He closed his eyes and let himself feel the connection between them, this impossible bond between a human and an alien predator that should have been enemies. "You are not alone anymore," he whispered. "I promise." Shadow rumbled again, and this time the vibration was different, warmer, more content. It was the sound she made when she felt safe, when she trusted that no harm would come. Outside the cell, the station continued its endless rotation through the darkness of space. Thousands of beings went about their lives, unaware that something extraordinary was happening in the lower levels. A man and a monster, sitting together in silence, understanding each other in ways that words could never capture. It was, Jake thought, the beginning of something new, something that might change the galaxy forever. He just hoped the galaxy was ready for it. The attack came without warning. Jake was in Shadow's new quarters, a converted cargo bay that had been fitted with climbing structures and temperature controls to match her home world. They were practicing new words in her language when the station's emergency alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed overhead. Commander's voice came through the speakers, tight with barely controlled fear. "All personnel, this is not a drill. We are under attack. The Crimson Syndicate has disabled our outer defenses and is boarding the station. All civilians proceed to emergency shelters immediately. Security teams to defensive positions." Jake stood up quickly. The Crimson Syndicate was the most dangerous criminal organization in this sector of the galaxy. They dealt in weapons, slaves, and illegal technology. They were ruthless and well-armed, and they never attacked unless they were certain they could win. Shadow was on her feet too, her 6 eyes darting toward the door. She could sense the change in the station's atmosphere, the fear and chaos spreading through the corridors. Her claws extended automatically, an instinct she could not control. The door to the cargo bay burst open. Security Chief stood there, his 4 arms carrying 2 rifles and 2 pistols. His face was grim. "Human, we need to move. The Syndicate has breached decks 7 through 12. They are killing everyone in their path." "What do they want?" His eyes flicked to Shadow. Word got out about your success with the Tamed is worth a fortune on the black market. They could use her as a weapon or sell her to the highest bidder. Either way, they are coming for her, and they will kill anyone who gets in their way. Jake felt cold anger rise in his chest. "She is not a weapon, she is not property, she is my friend." "Then help me protect her. We need to get to the emergency shelter on Deck 3. The walls there are reinforced, and we can hold out until Coalition reinforcements arrive." Jake turned to Shadow and hummed low in his chest. "Bad people are coming. They want to take you. We need to run." Shadow's response was immediate. She rose to her full height, 12 feet of muscle and scale and fury. Her eyes burned bright, and a low growl rumbled from deep inside her. The message was clear. She was not running anywhere. "She wants to fight," Jake said. Shook his head. "That is suicide. There are hundreds of them and one of her." "2 of us," Jake corrected. "I am not leaving her." Before could argue, an explosion rocked the corridor outside. Screams and weapons fire echoed through the station's metal walls. The Syndicate forces were close now, maybe 1 or 2 decks away. Jake made a decision. "Give me a weapon," he said. Handed him a pistol without hesitation. It was a simple energy weapon, easy to use, deadly at close range. Jake checked the charge and nodded. "Get the civilians to safety," he said. "Shadow and I will slow them down." "Human, this is what needs to happen. Go, Chief. Those people need you more than we do." Stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something surprising. He placed one of his 4 hands on Jake's shoulder, a gesture of respect among his people. "You are either the bravest being I have ever met or the craziest. Probably both. Good luck, human." Then he was gone, running down the corridor toward the civilian sections. Jake turned to Shadow and took a deep breath. "Are you ready?" She rumbled in response. It was not a word exactly, but Jake understood. She was ready. She had been caged and helpless for 8 months. Now she had a chance to fight back, and she was going to take it. They moved into the corridor together. The first Syndicate squad found them 2 minutes later. There were 6 of them, wearing black armor and carrying heavy weapons. They were professionals, experienced killers who had raided dozens of stations and ships across the sector. They lasted about 30 seconds. Shadow moved like nothing Jake had ever seen. She was fast, impossibly fast for something her size. Her claws cut through armor like it was paper. Her tail swept legs out from under attackers before they could aim. She was a storm of violence, beautiful and terrible at the same time. But she was not mindless. She stayed close to Jake, always keeping him in her line of sight. When 2 raiders tried to circle around behind him, she was there, her body shielding him from their weapons' fire. When a 3rd raider raised a rocket launcher, Jake shouted a warning and Shadow ducked, the explosive passing over her head and blowing a hole in the wall behind them. They moved through the station deck by deck, clearing corridors, protecting the fleeing civilians. Jake gave commands in low hums and gestures, and Shadow responded instantly. It was not like commanding a dog or a horse. It was like fighting alongside a partner who understood him completely. Was a young human engineer who had been trapped in a maintenance shaft when the attack began. She crawled out just in time to see Jake and Shadow moving through the main corridor of Deck 9. Later, she would describe the scene to anyone who would listen. "He was so calm," she said. "There was fire and explosions and screaming everywhere, but Jake just walked through it like he was taking a stroll in the park. And Shadow, she was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. She killed anyone who tried to hurt us, but she was so gentle with the civilians. She actually picked up a child who had fallen and carried her to safety in her mouth, so carefully that the kid did not even get a scratch. The battle lasted 4 hours. By the end, the Syndicate forces were broken. Over 200 raiders had boarded the station. Less than 50 made it back to their ships, and those ships fled into hyperspace as soon as they were clear of the station's weapons range. Jake sat on the floor of Deck 7, his back against the wall. He was exhausted. His hands were shaking. His uniform was covered in smoke and blood, some of it his own from a wound on his arm where a raider's blade had gotten through. Shadow lay beside him, her massive head resting on the floor. Her scales were scorched in places, and she had a deep cut on her shoulder that would need medical attention, but her eyes were calm now. The battle was over. Jake reached out and placed his hand on her head. "We did it," he said softly. "We protected them." Shadow rumbled in response. The vibration was tired but satisfied. Footsteps approached. Jake looked up to see Commander standing over him. The skin was flickering through several colors, a sign of strong emotion that Jake had never seen before. "You saved this station," said. "You and your friend." Jake smiled weakly. "We just did what needed to be done." Looked at Shadow, and for the first time there was no fear in his eyes, only respect. "I was wrong about humans," he said. "I was wrong about many things. I think the galaxy has a lot to learn from your species." Jake leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. "Maybe," he said, "but right now I would settle for a hot meal and a really long nap." Shadow rumbled in agreement. The news of the battle at Nexus 7 spread across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Within days, everyone was talking about the human and the who had fought side by side against the Crimson Syndicate. Within weeks, the story had grown into something approaching legend. Jake found himself standing before the Galactic Council, not just the small group that governed Nexus 7, but the full assembly of the Coalition. Representatives from over 100 species filled the great chamber on the capital world of Prime. Their eyes, in all shapes and colors, were fixed on the small human standing at the central platform. Shadow stood beside him. She had healed well from her wounds, and her scales gleamed under the chamber's lights. She was calm and still, her 6 eyes scanning the assembly with quiet intelligence. The council members who sat closest to her looked nervous, but none of them moved away. Chancellor, an ancient being whose species had been traveling the stars for 1,000,000 years, spoke first. His voice was like wind through dry leaves. "Jake of Earth, you have done what none believed possible. You have tamed the untamable. You have turned a weapon of destruction into a force for protection. The Coalition owes you a great debt." Jake shook his head. "With respect, Chancellor, I did not tame Shadow, I befriended her. There is a difference." "Explain." "Taming implies control. It implies that I bent her will to mine, that I made her obey through force or manipulation. That is not what happened. Shadow chose to trust me because I showed her respect. She chose to fight beside me because she wanted to, not because I commanded it. She is not my pet or my weapon. She is my partner and my friend." The assembly murmured. Such concepts were foreign to many of the species present. Animals were tools in most galactic cultures, things to be used and discarded. The idea that a creature like the could be a partner was strange and unsettling. Chancellor considered Jake's words for a long moment. "You speak of partnership with a species that has killed hundreds of beings. How can such a thing be possible?" "Because the killing was our fault, not theirs." Jake's voice was steady, but there was passion behind it. "They did not ask us to invade their world. They did not ask us to capture their children and drag them across the galaxy. They fought back because we gave them no other choice. If we had approached them with respect instead of violence, things could have been different." "You believe they could coexist peacefully with other species?" "I believe any species can coexist peacefully if we are willing to make the effort. On my home world, humans spent thousands of years at war with the creatures around us. Wolves, bears, big cats. We feared them and they feared us. But eventually, we learned to understand each other. We found ways to share the same world. Some of those creatures became our closest companions. Others remained wild, but we learned to respect their space and their ways. Jake looked around the assembly. The galaxy is full of species that are different from each other. Different bodies, different minds, different ways of living. We can spend our existence fighting those differences, trying to conquer and control everything we do not understand. Or we can learn to see the value in those differences. We can build bridges instead of walls. The chamber was silent. Jake could feel the weight of all those eyes upon him, but he did not look away. "I'm not asking you to suddenly trust he continued. Trust takes time, but I am asking you to give them a chance. Recognize them as sentient beings. Stop hunting them, stop capturing them, stop treating them as monsters. Let me work with their species, learn their language, build relationships. I believe that in time they could become allies instead of enemies." Chancellor turned to consult with the other council members. They spoke in hushed voices for several minutes. Finally, the ancient being turned back to Jake. "The council has reached a decision. Effective immediately, they are to be classified as a protected sentient species under coalition law. Hunting, capturing, or harming them will be considered a crime punishable by the full weight of galactic justice." Jake felt relief wash over him like a warm wave. "Furthermore," the Chancellor continued, "the Council wishes to offer you a position, ambassador to predator species. You would be responsible for establishing peaceful relations with the and any other species deemed too dangerous for normal contact. You would have full resources and authority to pursue this mission as you see fit." Jake was quiet for a moment. It was everything he had hoped for and more. A chance to do real good, to change the way the galaxy thought about creatures like Shadow. But something held him back. "I am honored by the offer," he said carefully, "but I do not want a title or a position of power. Titles can be taken away. Power can be corrupted. What I want is something simpler. I want to teach." "Teacher?" "Yes, I want to start a school, a training program for beings from all species who want to learn how to work with dangerous creatures. Not how to control them or conquer them, but how to understand them. How to earn their trust. How to see them as partners instead of threats. That knowledge is more valuable than any title you could give me." Chancellor's ancient eyes glittered with something that might have been approval. "A wise request. The Council will provide whatever resources you need. What will you call this school?" Jake thought for a moment. He looked down at Shadow, who was watching him with those 6 bright eyes. She rumbled softly, a sound of encouragement. "The bridge," Jake said finally, "because that is what we are building. A bridge between species, between worlds, between ways of thinking that have been at war for too long." The Council voted unanimously to approve his request. In the years that followed, Jake's school grew beyond anything he had imagined. Students came from across the galaxy to learn the human approach to dangerous creatures. They learned patience. They learned empathy. They learned to see the universe through different eyes. Shadow never left Jake's side. She became the school's most famous graduate and its most beloved teacher. Students would gather around her, listening as Jake translated her low rumbles into words of wisdom. She had lived through fear and pain and rage, and she had come out the other side. Her story was proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, that even the fiercest hearts could learn to trust. Jake grew old, as humans do. His hair turned gray and his steps grew slower. But he never stopped teaching, never stopped building bridges, never stopped believing that the galaxy could be better than it was. On the day he died, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 92, Shadow was lying beside his bed. She stayed there for 3 days, refusing food and water, making low sounds that the other beings around her could not understand. But who had traveled across the galaxy to pay their respects knew what she was saying. She was telling the story of Jake, the small, soft creature who had heard her when no one else would listen, the human who had reached out his hand to a monster and found a friend. It was a story that would be told for generations. On distant worlds, around alien fires, beings of every shape and size would speak of the man who had mastered the untamable, not through strength or violence, but through something far more powerful: love. And in the darkness between the stars, they sang his name,